My name is Lindsay Niwa. On May 29th, our family lost a son, husband, and my brother Brandon, also affectionately known as Beej. Tonight, we are so pleased to introduce Bob Wilkie and his team at I Got Mind. Through my conversations with Bob, I can tell you I've been extremely impressed and touched by his intentions, integrity, and his commitment to helping others. I hope you enjoy tonight's event.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to tonight's event where we're going to be talking about being trauma informed. My name is Bob Wilkie. Really excited to be here with the team and the community of Medicine Hat. I've been coming in and out of Medicine Hat since I was about 16 years old. I've got some great stories. I've got some terrifying stories. Playing in that old barn down by the rink when I was a member of the Swift Current Broncos. And the conversation that we're going to have tonight, we're just so thankful that we get the opportunity to really share some valuable information. We have to thank some of the following people for putting this all together and their leadership and really being exceptional with being foresighted and preventative measures. The Brandon Niwa Legacy Fund, the Beej project. You heard from Lindsay and Greg. I got to spend quite a bit of time over the last week really putting this all together and getting some stories and finding out what their intention was. It was awesome. The Medicine Hat Public School District number 76, Prairie Rose School District, and Reagan. Just love working with those guys. The Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education and the Medicine Hat Police. Had some great conversations with Chief Mike there this week, and you're gonna hear from him a little bit. It's meant to change things for you. The community's been absolutely hit one thing after another with the loss, jobs, and the oil industry and lives, unfortunately. And tonight we're going to talk about some things that are really going to make a difference for you. Being trauma informed is just so critically important. What you can expect from tonight's event is just, we're going to provide a lot of insights. We're going to provide quite a bit of education. So if you have a pen and paper handy, make sure that you are writing things down. There's lots of great information for anybody who is going to be able to relate to our stories that we're sharing tonight. We like to be entertaining. We hope that we're going to entertain you for the next 65 minutes. Lots of ideas and lots of solutions. It's just so important that we're trying to paint this very clear picture. I've got some brilliant people with me. The I Got Mine team has grown during the pandemic. It's been awesome. Sean O'Grady and I, our mental health clinician, he does so many things. And we spent the last 3 years driving up and down the highways of Western Canada, going to communities and talking about mental health. And it's been just a fantastic ride. I've learned a ton. We have some great conversations. Sean, thanks for being here, and just share a little bit about your experience and what you currently do with the people that are listening.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I'm extremely happy to be here and certainly enjoyed very much both Jennifer and Reagan's passion putting this event together and working with them. And it's a very special place. The Hat is also a special place for me. Have very much enjoyed my time down there. I've always met just an incredibly friendly group of people that are down to earth. I might say share some of my blue collar roots that are near and dear to my heart as well. Yeah, I've been involved in the mental health field for a number of years now. Primarily the director of a number of mental health units for young children and adolescents up here in Calgary, a place called Hull Services. Spent a lot of time there. And then also, yeah, I'm involved in some community-based work, some individual and family-based therapy and working with the Child Protective Services here in Calgary as well. Most importantly, got that call from you, Bob, sadly after the Humboldt tragedy that just passed by, a couple of days ago there last week, and have been really enjoying taking what we often keep in these sort of deep, dark, inpatient mental health units and trying to share it out with the community. The information's excellent. And I think we really believe that if we can share more of this information out with well-intended community people, we can continue to hopefully make a positive difference in people's lives. And so I'm just thrilled to be here and happy to be a part of the IGM team.
Another adventure for us, Sean. Usually, like I said, it's up and down the roads, eating some A&W, driving till 3 a.m. through snowstorms. Our other new teammate, and I shouldn't say new, she's been with us since September, October, but I think we can still call her a little bit of a rookie, is Caitlin Waters. And Kate's just been a fantastic addition with her experience, her knowledge. Kate, go ahead and share with the group a little bit about your background.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm happy to be here as well. I am a small town Northern Ontario girl, moved out to Calgary and happened to cross paths with Sean O'Grady, and that's where my career and my passion started for working with different populations, some that have experienced trauma, some that haven't. And I currently work in one of the public school systems here in specialized population, and I'm passionate about my work. I also have a private practice and love educating people. The information that you guys are going to hear tonight, it was life-changing for me when I heard it. And I believe that knowledge is power, and I'm here to share some of that with you so that you can take control and feel like you can regain some control in your life, because that's what it did for me. So I'm happy to be here and excited for the next 45 minutes, 60 minutes.
And so tonight, what we want to do is we want to create a picture. It's so important that one of the most valuable things that I learned in my healing of dealing with several different things, anxiety, excessive stress, depression, suicidal thoughts, and definitely behavior, was how we think. And we think in pictures. So when people talk about trauma, there's really not a picture that comes to our mind. So sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it can be quite frustrating. Our goal tonight is to create that picture for you. It's about giving you the pictures that you need so that it makes sense in your mind. And now you can start to problem solve, because it's really tough to solve any problems if you don't have a clear picture of where to even start. And that's what we're going to do here tonight. So, Sean, when we're talking about creating pictures and opening our minds and listening when we may be in some of that pain, why is it so important that people are open to understanding what contributes to mental illness?
I think what we're really trying to do is that concept, and I think maybe has been used in some cliche sort of terms, but that idea that we're not alone, right? That we are all in some sort of adverse experience from time to time, and for some of us it's really, really intense some days, and for other days it's not so much. But I think when we try to segregate ourselves from being disconnected from the human experience, being disconnected from those people that matter to us, we can really start to pull away. And that becomes, for many of us, a very isolating and lonely experience, when the idea is that no one would understand me, or that no one really appreciates the pain that I'm in. I think when we can push ourselves back into those more common conversations, many of us can relate to the first time that we shared something that's a really vulnerable and scary thing to do. And all of a sudden you do realize, wow, other people might feel that same kind of stress and distress and pressure. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is to push ourselves, because it's really difficult. It's not easy to do, but to push ourselves into these real life human conversations when we start to experience that we're all going through some sort of difficulty or struggle, more so, since last spring than ever. I think we've got some commonalities and some relatable experiences. Just really important to talk about that and to open that up.
Yeah. It can be such a difficult thing to be vulnerable, like you say, Sean. Like, it's, for a lot of people, it's just they don't want to air their dirty laundry. We've been conditioned to not talk about it. I remember going to, grandma's house, and you would bring up the uncle's name, and everybody, the room would just get quiet, right? Like, we don't talk about that. And so we become very much conditioned to not talk our problems out. And that is one of the key things that I've learned in getting to where I am today, is that if you don't, well, like Sean says, if you don't talk it out, odds are you're going to be acting it out. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot with the people that are out there, especially during COVID, and some of the behavior that's going on is people, they don't know how to process. They've been traumatized, as we're going to describe tonight. And now we're seeing all that acting out. So as we get into the conversation tonight, it's really important that you understand some of the clinical piece behind it. And Kate, we want to talk about just being able to get grounded, because if we're experiencing trauma or we've gone through some sort of traumatic event, and we all of a sudden these things happen in our lives and we can't understand why all of a sudden we're feeling the same way all over again. It's because what I've learned is the word is called triggered. And getting grounded is one of the most important things that we can do. We want to give everybody some things that they can do tonight, maybe even now before we start. What are some of the things clinically that you would offer to people that would come and see you to help them get grounded?
I think 100% talking about this tonight, it's an important point to bring up, because like Bob had said, our natural protection mechanism is to not allow ourselves to go to this place. And tonight we're here to make it okay to go to that place, but also within reason and within your reason, what works for you. And so the term being grounded, or we hear it all the time, is mindful. Mindfulness is a big buzzword right now, but what does it mean? It means you're bringing yourself back to right now. So if we are talking about something or you are thinking about something, I want you to have awareness of that, what that looks like for you, and know what you need to do in that moment. And for some people, it can be focusing on things around the room. So what are 5 things you can see? It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. Pick up something that you can touch. Some people will pick up an ice cube to jolt them out of going to the past or having anxiety about the future. And so really it's about bringing yourself back. Progressive muscle relaxation is another one, where you're tensing and releasing some of your muscles to, again, you're bringing that awareness to here and now so that you can focus on understanding this information, gaining knowledge, and gaining power. And you know what? If none of that works, that's okay, because we can always take a step back, take a step away, do what you need to do, and come back.
See, now I'm a big Kung Fu Panda fan, and now that I've learned all this information, I know what he was doing, right? Master Shifu was absolutely brilliant. We've got a very special guest tonight, and unfortunately he can't be here with us live. He's a very dear friend. I've known the Malarchuks for most of my life, and I got to spend quite a bit of time with Clint Malarchuk, who is very famous for having something terrible happen to him. And he's going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But recently, he's also a chiropractor that works with horses. Clint has always done something very unique. And he happened to get kicked in the face by a horse the other day. And so he's really struggling with a concussion and going through some things. And today he had to go get some relief to one of his eyes. They were doing a procedure on him. So we got together. He was so gracious. He's a warrior. He truly is. And recorded some information for us. So you're going to hear his story as we go. And he absolutely regrets not being here. You know, he's a Western Canadian boy. He grew up in Edmonton and traveled the highways, playing in the Western Hockey League. So I know that you're going to enjoy his story. As we get started here, Sean, you know, we talk about being trauma informed. Why is it so important that we know this stuff? You know, there's so much to being trauma informed, and you working in the trauma industry with kids and young adults. How has it helped, and why is it so important that we understand what trauma is?
I think in this context and talking with the people of the hat in this, you know, most important context is so that we have compassion for ourselves, and that we recognize that it's such an individualized experience. So we refrain from judging one another, right? We refrain from judging each other that, well, someone gone through this and they're doing okay, and so why isn't this person? So I think for me being, I mean, it means so many things, but in this particular context, Bob, I think it's really about having compassion for ourselves, letting it be okay for us to acknowledge that I'm struggling, to acknowledge that I'm feeling my pain, that I'm thinking some painful thoughts, and to really refrain from judging other people that might be, you know, struggling in a variety of ways themselves. I just think that's so important. And I think when we, you know, it is that idea that, you know, if someone's struggling with a physical ailment, you know, like they've got a heart-related condition, they've got some sort of cancer, it's really rare to see people judge that, but yet we often do still see some judgment of other people's emotional or mental pain. And I think being trauma informed is recognizing that we need to have compassion for ourselves and compassion for other people that might be struggling because of some sort of adverse experience.
Kate, I'm going to come to you real quick. We were putting the videos together on being trauma informed for our online course. And one of the things that really struck a chord with me was the intervention piece. And on the screen, you're going to see in the second line there where it just talks about, allows us to target developmental activities and interventions. Would you mind just shedding a little bit of light on that? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. And I think that one of the reasons this is such an important point for me is that it is such an insightful piece of information when you can start to understand the connections between where you're at emotionally and physiologically and cognitively and where those interventions are coming in. And if you're up here and your interventions are down here, then you're going to be missing the target. And so many people will say, well, that worked for her. Why doesn't it work for me? Because you're not her, and you might be in a different spot than where she is. And giving you this information, making sure that the interventions that you're trying and the awareness that you have of your experiences, you'll be able to hit the mark that much more than maybe you were before when you're grappling at just anything and everything. Right. So for me, understanding brain development and understanding where we're at individually can really help us identify what interventions are most appropriate and effective.
For me, a lot like Clint, our stories are similar with, unfortunately, a lot of trauma in our lives. And, it was really interesting on that slide where it just talked about, its future health and wellness. And I think me learning about trauma and what I had been through and what had happened to my brain and why it caused me to do this and it caused me to do that has absolutely led to my future health and wellness. I can tell you, all the trauma that I've suffered and all the different things I've been in my life, I've been able to put in their proper place. And even though there are some things that trigger me, like riding on a bus today is still a very difficult challenge for me, but I have my strategy so that I can go down there. I did it for another 12 years, riding the bus after that unfortunate day for me. Here is what Clint said about what he has benefited from by learning about trauma.
Learning trauma for me, I wish I knew about it years and years and years ago, but good for us in mental health and trauma work that we're way ahead of the game now. Of course, a lot of us have had childhood trauma, and there's physical trauma, there's emotional trauma, there's spiritual trauma, there's every kind of different trauma you can imagine, right? And so I think everybody's to a degree has had trauma in their life of some sort. And what it's done for me is I just wished I'd learned more sooner. I just took a course on trauma, on PTSD, learned a ton. Wished I'd done that years ago. But for me, I think it's just the education of when you go through trauma and then you find out what's going on physiologically or mentally or right now I'm going through a concussion. I've had a horse accident, so I've got physical trauma. I'm concussed, but I've also been down the emotional trauma. And as you know, probably being up in Canada, my claim to fame is when my jugular vein got severed and I almost died. And for me, even though I had childhood trauma, anxiety issues, OCD, that incident was a major life-threatening trauma. And I had no counseling, none was offered, and I didn't think of it either. It was back in '89. I mean, what do? You get back on the horse, take a shift off, whatever, and you go out there and just try and push through it. And it's really important, I think, that people should understand you can't do it on your own. You need help. You need to talk about it or share it with a buddy even. Doesn't have to be a doctor. Probably should be a therapist of some kind, but I believe that we have to heal, whatever kind of trauma we're talking. Physically, my face is healing. But emotionally, what I went through as a kid, and especially after my accident where I went 20 years with undiagnosed PTSD. And that's where, even though I was predisposed to mental illness, that exploded. I became suicidal thinking, worthless thoughts, depression, really bad anxiety. My OCD was off the charts. So basically, that physical trauma made everything else explode. That I was probably, it was probably sitting there waiting, and it waited. And it's a shame it took me 20 years to get healthy, to get diagnosed. I shouldn't say to get healthy, but to get diagnosed and to start to heal. Because I think the biggest thing with trauma is to heal.
Every time I talk to Clint, it can really turn into a very deep conversation, and it's great, because there's very few people in the world that I can relate to in that way, that we've, been through a lot, and trauma is a very unique experience. And Sean, what Clint's talking about, and all the regrets, and I know I have a lot of regrets, and I know there's people out there that COVID has caused certain things, and the community of medicine there's been a lot of different things that have gone on, and they're not processing it right. They're not dealing with it. They're thinking that it'll just go away, and everything's been amplified. It's really important that we understand that the trauma is very unique to the individual. And Sean, with what you've learned from and worked with, the world-renowned psychologist, Dr. Bruce Perry, maybe just shed a little bit light on why it is a unique experience, and then, why is it that we do some of the things that we do, like shut down or embarrassed or shame or guilt, when we have those kind of experiences?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Perry's work and being able to certify with him and his team has had a profound impact on my clinical work, for sure. One of the things that I most appreciate about Dr. Bruce Perry's work, though, is how he really brings us back to some very meaningful human relational experiences, and that those in and of themselves often become some of the best experiences to help us move and recover from these things. And in fact, what's so encouraging is that many of the things cost $0, right? And I think we underestimate the importance of, as Clint's saying, is finding a safe person to speak to, that can hear us, that can understand us, that doesn't judge us, that truly tries to listen to us. Sometimes that can be a therapist. Sometimes that can be a really good friend on a golf course or in a campfire. Those are experiences that have been much more strained as of late with our sort of social distancing strategies that have been emphasized, that I do also understand are critically important. But one of those things is really this idea that we have to be physically distanced, but we need to find a way to be socially connected still. Because I think, it's understandable to acknowledge that we're all struggling, and that's going to be individualized again as it is for us. But that, I think that idea in these COVID times is physically distanced, but we need to find some sort of social connection. Much of what we're trying to do with this event, tonight.
Yeah. And Kate, he brought up a really interesting point, and when I think about it, it's exactly what happened to me. And then, we had Karen Lee Gardner in our first show, and Karen Lee was the first Canadian woman to ever win a gold medal in the downhill. And it was really interesting because she just turned 50 years old, and she had had a car accident, and all of a sudden, she was reliving all these things that she had kind of forgot about. And Clint described it really well in there, where it was that, near-death experience that he had, of getting stepped on by a skate, that just opened Pandora's box. And I've had it happen to me. Is that because we suppress the trauma and the thoughts and the feelings for so long that it just can't be held anymore? Or why would something like that happen?
I do think that what they were talking about, what you're talking about, is a really common experience. And you've kind of hit the nail on the head, is that our experiences don't go anywhere. They're part of who we are, and we can file them away in our imaginary filing cabinet all we want. And like we talked about before, we naturally want to protect ourselves. We naturally want to think about the things that make us happy and make us smile. To think about the things that are so hard for us, and to allow ourselves to go there, is really, really difficult, especially if we are not equipped to do so, or don't feel like we're surrounded with by the support that we need to do that. And so we might have that experience and file it away. It's still there. And when we start to potentially view our world through a different lens as a result of that, all that's happening is strengthening those connections that, you know, the world is a scary place, or the world is a bad place, or whatever our experience might be telling us. And you're right, Bob, at some point, it all comes falling out. You know, that filing cabinet that's full of my tax information right now, but it's full, it eventually will blow up. And unfortunately, it does happen more often than not. Sometimes when we don't feel like we know what to do, we just keep filing it away, hoping it's going to go away.
On the screen, we're going to bring up a definition. Again, we want to make sure that we're very clear here tonight. And so the definition of trauma, when you look it up in the dictionary, it's a personal experience that produces psychological injury or pain when something happens to us. You know, we just talked about the individual experience with trauma. It's so important that we understand it. It is just like that picture that's on there that gets all taped up, no different than like when I think about all the different scars that I have physically on my body. I can tell you exactly what happened with this one on my hand, or the one on my eye, or the one on my knee, or the one on my back, all the different scars that I have. And, you know, a lot of times we're proud of that, right? Like that was the thing as a hockey player, is chicks dig scars. But when we're talking about mental and psychological, yeah, we don't think too many people dig that. You know, it's something that can feel very shameful. I know for me, I struggled with the survivor's guilt, is what I came to learn because of what I watched happen on the bus. Sean, when we talk about, you know, this personal experience that produces psychological injury or pain, there's so many different things that can trigger us, right? When we think that we're okay, all of a sudden we can watch something on TV, we could see something, and boom, we're right back in a moment.
Yeah, and I really like the simplicity of that definition. But what's critically important is I'd like people to just resonate with the idea of that happens to us instead of what's wrong with you, right? And so what's happened to you versus what's wrong with you, which I think is being alluded to in that definition. And then to pull from Kate's point is that when we keep filing stuff away and the pain and suffering continues to build because there's only a finite amount of room, we're just not certain which trigger it is that might sort of push us over the edge. But when we continue to, like I like to use the balloon analogy, if we don't find ways to drain the balloon, eventually the balloon pops. And sometimes when we're not prepared for that, it can be quite a drastic sort of impact in terms of what happens to us when the balloon pops, particularly if we don't necessarily have the tool in our toolbox to pull out and use in that particular situation.
Kate, you know, again, we want to give skills, right? And so the people in Medicine Hat are dealing with a lot of different things, and we may notice something with somebody. And Sean said it, and I just love that question, because all my life, all I heard was, what the hell is wrong with you? And so it made me feel like there was even more something wrong with me. And it wasn't until I heard Sean say that phrase, you know, what's happened to you? And I think about that. If somebody would have asked me that question, I absolutely would have been more inclined to answer. And so when we're trying to help people, trying to help each other, and we notice a change, why is it so important that we start with that kind of question to really get them engaged, to maybe open up and start to talk about what's bothering them?
I think it's a fantastic question. And I think the point of it being that with the question of if something's wrong with us, then there's that guilt, there's that feeling that we've done something wrong, that we are responsible for the way that we're feeling or the experiences that we've had. And, you know, if we slice our finger open and it's down to the bone, we know the steps we need to take to get the support to make it better. We can go to the hospital, we can get stitches, we can patch it up with a Band-Aid, we can take critical care of it until we are starting to heal. And then we can move on. We learn from that experience, potentially not to cut our fingers, but we're able to shelf it as an experience that we've learned through and moved forward. With emotional trauma and the triggers that we experience, we don't see them, so we may not understand the full effects of them, and then we don't know what to do about them if we've never experienced that, or it's a piling up of that. So when we can take away the stigma behind something being wrong with us and figure out how do we need to support ourselves, what's happened to us, I'm the same as everybody else, this is my story, this is part of who I am, and learn from that, then we are in the position to start to move forward with the way that we need to do that.
Excellent stuff. We're going to share a little bit with Chief Warden, and really interesting story. Again, you know, somebody who's been in the field for over 25 years and, you know, came from a city like Calgary where there's always lots of things going on. Really interesting to hear what Chief had to say just about what he recalls about the trauma that he's endured. So go ahead and watch this. We'll be right back.
You know, one in particular was Sid's death that I went to, and having to deal with, you know, not only the trauma of, you know, the visual part of that is going into the bedroom. I can tell you, I could draw it out like it was yesterday in my head, and deal with the family. So, you know, when you get into the house and the family's there and they're grieving, and that part as well is really, as a young officer, you're not sure. You know, I think back then we weren't really trained on what to say and what to do, and you try to muddle your way through it. And, you know, I remember sitting in that room with the young infant and not wanting to go back out because the family was there, because I didn't know what to say. I had no idea. And so I honestly sat in that room for a while. And of course, those memories aren't great to have, but there are certain things. So there's a television show in particular, it's a movie that when I watch it, it takes me back to that day. Train Spotting is the movie, and there's a scene in there that when I watch it, you know, I try not to watch it anymore, but it does take me back to that time, and takes me back to that moment, the smells, all those different things. So, you know, one of the things that I've learned over the years and through conversations with whether it be therapists or coworkers or people who have been through trauma, is the fact of needing to talk those things out. So really what I did back then is I tucked that away, and I put that memory away, never to talk about it or deal with it again. And you can see how it can only stay hidden for so long, and it starts to bring itself out in different parts of your life. And for me, it's that memory that comes back, and you know, really was one of the very disturbing things that I saw. So I saw lots of accidents, lots of, you know, unfortunate tragedies. And even as a youngster before, I was a police officer, saw some close friends, you know, a death, a car accident. I was right there at the scene. And those are things it's interesting how when you realize that they were traumatic events when you can just picture them, when you can just, again, the smells and the sounds, and they're all like it was yesterday. You could just transport yourself back to that moment. So you know that those are things that have impacted you as a youngster. So again, in policing, you see so much, and it's that an impact that it has. So it's one of the things I think. So when you talk about the things that I learned from that, really is the fact that you need to unpack those events. You need to debrief those. You need to talk about how it made you feel, how it made you think. And those are things I think that helps you kind of rationalize them in your brain, and then you can put them away. But I think when you just put them away, you don't talk about them, you don't deal with them, you address them, that room and that part of your brain gets full. That's when it starts to change your behaviors, and it starts to impact your wellness, your health, you know, your sleeping and all those different things. That is really from my experiences, you know, working in an HR department for, you know, probably up to 8 years with the Calgary Police. Saw a number of people come through, and they dealt with traumatic events and the same sort of thing. They didn't deal with them. They just put them away, tucked them away, because it didn't seem at the time like no one wanted to deal with them. And then we didn't have an environment where it was okay to go talk to somebody about it, but things are changing.
Yeah, can't imagine, you know, what the police first responders deal with. You know, Sean, we were in Medicine Hat and did some work at the remand center there and talked, you know, in one session with some of the inmates, and then we're fortunate to speak with some of the guards, and it was amazing how some of their life stories were very similar as to the trauma that they had experienced. And you know, when we talk about trauma and especially with kind of what's going on in Medicine Hat, you know, with some of the young men and the choices that they've made. I mean, everybody deals with the trauma in a different way. I don't know that it's specific, you know, Sean, I'd be curious to know, just for the audience out there, you know, would we see something different in a male dealing with the traumatic event versus a female in a traumatic event? Or is it just going to see a change in behavior, like Chief said?
Well, I think for the sake of not wanting to overgeneralize, I do think, you know, historically, or some research would indicate that females do a better job of expressing themselves and talking out their feelings. Certainly not always, but those of us knuckle walking men tend to not be able to share and express ourselves as much and as often. And so there is, you know, certainly some correlations there, although not that you could completely, suggest that. But one of the things that struck me when the chief was talking is the concept of the stress response system that we have in our brains. And I think when you experience the things that so many people in the community of Medicine Hat are experiencing, is it's impacting our stress response system. So how we choose to cope with that, do we talk about it? Do we deal with it? Do we start to develop skills and abilities? If we do that, there's a chance that we can develop more resiliency in our stress response system. And so when we're experiencing the stress within our brains and bodies, if I've done some things like talk it out, use regulating activities, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about tonight, there's a better chance that I'm more resilient, you know, because inevitably those are really painful and awful things for anyone's sets of eyes to experience what the chief's describing. When we sort of store it within ourselves, when we don't share those things, we end up with a more vulnerable stress response system. So meaning that then anything that even signifies anything related to an infant death or a car accident, it's going to make our stress response system that much more vulnerable. And sometimes when we don't talk out those experiences, we drink them out, or we drug them out, or we numb them out in some other sort of more harmful way. And so that's why I think, you know, dealing with our stress response system is so critically important, so that maybe we develop a bit more tolerance and resiliency to deal with that. Because, you know, life is pain, you know, it's just a reality.
Yeah. This next video is Clint talking about some of the physical effects of trauma. And, you know, we've talked a lot about the mental effects that you know, going through a traumatic incident can cause for us. But if we don't deal with those things, they do start to manifest physically. So go ahead and watch this, and we'll be right back.
I've gone years of doing really, really well, and then something will happen and I'll dive down, and I have to start my recovery almost all over again. And then we can talk about the self-medication. You know, trauma does cause a lot of things, like for me, anxiety, depression, OCD, PTSD, all these things. And so I have to be aware of my emotions. But I guess I don't know if I'll ever get over trauma completely, but I can certainly have good days, great years. But I have to be on the alert of number one, my anniversaries. You know, I'm a suicide survivor. There's an anniversary there, you know, my jugular vein, my childhood. So I've got a few anniversaries to be conscious about, because I do get squirrely at those times. And first thing I want to do is drink to numb that, to get rid of that. And there's a huge correlation between mental illness, trauma, all these things, and addiction. And I certainly get it. I understand why. Feel real crappy on here, feel good over here. Well, I'm gonna feel good, and that's what happens with people. They want to feel good. We all want to, but then that's a whole different animal that, you know, you go down another rabbit hole for sure. Self-medicating.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of different things. Exactly what I had struggled with as a young man. And well, you know what? I'm going to share a little bit about my story. For those of you that have been living in the Hat, I'm sure you remember the day. It was a day that changed my life forever. I was a 17-year-old young man getting real close to reaching my goal and dream of becoming an NHL hockey player. December 30th, 1986, my life changed forever. Go ahead and watch this, and we'll be right back.
Kind of closeness. December 30th, 1986 was a tragic day, not only for the Swift Current Broncos, but also for the Western Hockey League. 4 members of that Broncos team lost their lives: Trent Cressy, Scott Kruger, Chris Mantica, and Brent Ruff, when the Broncos bus hit a patch of black ice.
By a junior hockey team turned into a tragedy this afternoon when the team bus slid off an icy road near Swift Current, Saskatchewan. 4 of the young hockey players were killed. The bus was carrying members of the Swift Current Broncos of the Western Hockey League. They were on their way to a game in Regina tonight when their bus left the Trans-Canada Highway and rolled into a ditch. 2 of the players died when they were thrown from the wreck, and 2 others died when they were trapped underneath the bus. 19 other players suffered minor injuries.
A tragic story, and one that is remembered by a lot of people.
I remember the day. I remember how cold it was. I remember the book that I was reading. I remember the music I was listening to with my new Walkman right after the Christmas break. I can remember all those things clear as a bell. And, like Clint said, 20 some years later, finally start to heal. And I get a phone call a couple of years ago from a friend of mine saying, "Hey, did you hear about the Bronco bus?" And right away, it all came flooding back, because he didn't have to say anything else. We didn't even know what was going on, but automatically triggered. And, one of my good friends, Darren Kruger, was scouting for the Flames at the time, was in Okotoks. I called him, he came over right away. And it was amazing how hard it was to not pick up that bottle and just drown myself because of the pain that I was feeling. And I remember being terrified to go to bed that night because I didn't want to relive all those nightmares that I had worked so hard to get rid of. And I think when we're talking about trauma, it's a very powerful thing. And we want to make sure that we're, painting as good a picture as we possibly can. Sadie, if you could just pull up the picture of the brain and the different things that happen. Sean, when these things happen to me and I watched my teammate die at the age of 17, and that scarring happens. I've got that incident, like Kate said, that's a file that goes in, and it was a rather big file, almost had its own drawer. What starts to happen to our brains? Because I think this is a really good graphic for you to demonstrate.
Right. I think it is important. Our brains are really quite amazing, and neuroscience has done, and neuroscientists have done a remarkable job of moving us to a much more comprehensive understanding. However, I will be thrilled if I'm still around 50 years from now to see what more we're learning, because we're just learning so much year after year. But we do at least know and understand the mechanisms and the way our brains actually serve to protect us in certain urgent or traumatic events. And so in an event like, what Medicine Hat's been grappling with over the last year, what you dealt with in that situation is our brain has this mechanism that kind of is built in to protect us from this kind of unavoidable threatening situation. And so we move from, as you can see on the screen, the wizard brain, which is also known as our prefrontal cortex or our executive functioning, the thing we want to use when we're at school, we're at work, we're playing a competitive sport. And it moves us down into this kind of autonomic response where it really kind of allows us, can I fight this situation? Can I escape the situation? Or am I just somewhat frozen or flocked together with other people in this really profoundly? And so what I would worry about, and what you and I have certainly talked about is that kind of flocking and frozen experience that I think you and your teammates dealt with back in '86, and probably this flocking and frozen experience that many people in the community of the Hat are dealing with right now. Some that are probably also just, fleeing. How do I get out of here? How do I avoid? And some that are probably trying to fight, and I think remembering that it's understandable and it's okay. But how do we then start to maybe move ourselves after the significant impacts of these really tragic events back to a place where we can move back up into a much more thoughtful and planful part of our brain. And it's really important to get back up there, because when we stay in that low level brain response, everything is supercharged, right? Our blood pressure, our heart rate, and we're really not able to access the thinking part of our brain as much when we stay frozen or flocked down there.
Yeah. And Kate, I want to talk just a little bit, Sean's painted that picture from wizard to lizard and what happens to us. But we talked earlier about that intervention, and that's why we have that big stop sign right in the middle of that picture, because it's so important that people understand that, it's those interventions that really can stop us from getting into that painful or very reactive part of our brain. Having those strategies, the grounding strategies, all the things that we're talking about is that big stop sign in the middle of that brain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the example of reaching for a bottle is a good indication that I am not operating necessarily at a cognitive level, that the intervention that I'm looking for is something at a lower level of functioning. I am accessing something that will fulfill a need, and I need to replace that need with something that's functional, something that's healthy, and something that's going to have the same effect. So then the next time I can remember that, oh yeah, I did this instead and it had the same impact. It moved me forward. I was able to deal with what I was going through, and that will be my default now, rather than reaching for that innate kind of deeper need of drinking, drugs, harming, whatever it is. So once you understand that about yourself and understand where you're at, and we're all moving in and out of these different phases, that's human nature. We all do that, but these traumatic experiences will jolt us a lot faster. And if we continue to file things away, we're brought back there a lot quicker. Like Sean was talking about, that stress response and that emotional reaction that we have, it becomes more of the norm than not. And that's a scary place to be.
Our friend Clint is going to talk a little bit more about some of the physiological things that start to happen to him when he becomes triggered or is reliving or going through some new trauma.
Took me to, suicidal thinking. As I mentioned, obviously depression, anxiety, and all those things. On the physical side, I became very insomniac. Not all the time, but I go through, and I learned that an anniversary of a trauma, your body remembers. So all of a sudden, a year later, I can't sleep for 3 nights. I'm going, what's going on? You dummy, it's your anniversary, or close to an anniversary of when I almost died. So, physical, so definitely insomnia, loud noises, don't ever sneak up behind me and go boo. Things like that, because physically I'll jump right out of my boots. And when I was in treatment a couple of years, long time ago now, but somebody came up behind me, a counselor, hey Clint, how you doing? And I must have jumped 3 feet in the air, and he goes, oh my God, Clint, I'm so sorry, I forgot. So the physical parts, and I still deal with loud noises, insomnia at times. Sometimes I get real anxious and jittery, like physical jitters, where my hands are like, my body trembles. So that's kind of the physical parts of it.
Some, anxiety attacks, would that be a part of it, Sean? I remember having those a couple of years, and even after that of the accident, just that unresolved trauma and feeling and not processing. Could that have been a result of me not dealing with my trauma?
The body speaks, right? And I think we really need to pay attention to our bodies. And so, yes, I think there's a lot of, headaches, nausea, diarrhea, pulling at our skin. I can often tell how anxious I am in a work week based on how many hangnails I've ripped off my fingers in a week. Those sorts of superficial strategies to manage anxiety and disruption. And so I think, paying attention to our body and using it as an indication or a warning sign to go, if my body's telling me this based on these reactions or responses to things, what could I do, right? How do I respond to these situations instead of perhaps maybe react to them? And how do I, maybe do some proactive things to help manage myself in those particular situations?
Next, we're going to show another video with Lindsay. Again, with a great conversation we had the other day. This came out of her story, and I just thought it really it resonated with me, and I think it'll resonate with you too. So go ahead and watch, and we'll be right back.
You feel when you go through, I don't know if you felt this, but like when you go through trauma, sometimes you feel very alone because this thing happens to you, and then you're like, I don't want to, it's so much, you can't share it with people. But then when you find out someone else gets it, you're like, oh, that's so comforting to me. And not because of a trauma bonding kind of thing, but I can just be in your space, and I can start crying 1 minute and you just get it, and I will be fine in 2 minutes, and then we can laugh about something. I can be so labile and schizophrenic, and you just get it and appreciate it, and it's like a language. I don't know if that dramatic. So to feel like you're not alone too. So if I don't know how to help him with his emotions, or what they say, anxiety begets anxiety. So if I'm not modeling good coping, my kid's not going to know how to. So we need to be a good example for our kids too. And I would say in the last year, parents are struggling, and we need help. We need help. We need help because we are struggling, and we need to remember we're setting the tone for our kids and going forward too, right? It's just so desperately needed. Even if you take away everything that's happened, just even with COVID and people so angry and everything happening in the world right now, we need help.
I think it's fantastic. I think she's absolutely right. We all need help, right, at some point or another, and especially with COVID going on. And I love the part where she talks about the role model. If we're not dealing with our stuff, Kate, if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not trying to figure this out, those young people that are around us, the people that we love around us, we can start to traumatize them with our behavior, thoughts. And you think about, if you've seen something on TV and all of a sudden now I get overly frantic because I think that's going to happen to you. And now I start to and inundate you and create all these, crazy emotions. Right. My inability to control myself can absolutely traumatize the people that are around me.
Yeah, it's true. And it's unfortunate in some ways, but also fortunate because it gives us a chance to learn. This is there has never been a time in my parenting life that I have been so unsettled to not be able to answer the questions my kids have. When is this going to go away? When are things going to go back to normal? And I feel like with the experiences that Medicine Hat has had, you have COVID with no answers there, no control there. And then you have all this other things happening with no answers and no control. And it leads to a lack of control for everybody. And in human nature, one thing that provides that regulation, one thing that allows us to stay calm, to stay in that cognitive brain, is when we have the illusion or sense of control. We don't have that right now. So how do we become aware of what that looks like for us so that we are not impacting the people around us, and the people around us are equipped for that? When Lindsay's talking about finding that language, that trauma language, how she phrased it there, we're not I'm not looking for answers from anybody else about my journey. This is my journey. I'm looking for information so that I can start the path to healing and moving forward with my experiences. Sitting in a room with somebody who's gone through something, that's their experience. And I may not have experienced that directly, but I may understand. And that's what people are looking for, is an understanding that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have the feelings and to cry, and then let's figure out what we need to do and we can move forward. So it's our own journey. We're all scrambling for control, and slowly figuring out what that looks like. And like Sean said, that's how we develop that resiliency, so that next time it happens, we're that much more equipped.
And Sean, it's a perfect storm. It's cyclical. I mean, it's just, if we don't learn, right, we're trying to paint a picture for everybody that's listening here tonight so that they can start to change their behavior, maybe look for some resources and get some help. But when we don't, it's just this vicious cycle that goes around and around. And you talk about fight, flight, flock, or freeze. When we've got everybody, you know, around us going through one of these different things, it just adds to this. And I can't stress the importance enough of being able to recognize where you're at. And like Kate said, get control of you, because until you do that, you can't help anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, just so important. And one of the things that I was reflecting on, you know, as you and Kate are talking, is that I've had the privilege, you know, and to build on what's being shared, I've had the privilege to have a lot of conversation with a lot of little children that historically have been in a lot of pain. And what's remarkable to me is how simple it is, what our job or our role is as adults or role models, is to actually to not be a robot and pretend that things are great when they're not, but to actually just show up, stand up, be accountable for our actions, and apologize once in a while if we screw up. You know, I screw up a lot as a parent, but one of the things I think I'm pretty good at is being accountable for when I do screw up and apologizing. And I think that's so powerful. And I've heard that so many times in my therapeutic work, is that, you know, all these adults did all this crazy shit, but no one ever owned it, and no one ever thought to apologize or to take responsibility for their actions. And I just think that in and of itself, it's that, what I like to say, it's simple but not easy. And that's just so true, is that it is so powerful when we as adults can own the fact that I'm not doing okay, or that maybe I did screw up, and to just acknowledge. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing we can model to our kids, is that it's okay to screw up, but when you do, be accountable for it, and try to learn, and maybe skin your knee a little less the next time around. You know, I think that's just so important. And over 20 years of conversations, that comes through so many times, is not that people screwed up, but they never owned it when they did, and they never took responsibility for what they did.
Yeah. The great news is we can overcome all of it. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I've been able to overcome all of it. It takes a commitment. And well, like Clint's going to share here in the last couple of clips that we have of him, it's important that we understand that it's going to take work.
Yeah. When I'm at my best, I'm totally out of, I think, trauma. I'm out of feeling anxious, depressed, whatever I might be struggling with. But yeah, I appreciate the good days. Of course I do. But I also know there's things that are going to happen. And, you know, like, you know, I got to deal with this concussion that I got now, which has set me back. You know, I can't work out. I can't, you know, do some of the things. My mind wanders. I'm real forgetful right now. And I'm acceptant. There's a word we should probably throw in there, is acceptance that we're human and things are going to happen. And, you know, it's not a bed of roses all the time, but resiliency is huge, but accepting that, you know, shit happens.
I don't think you could put it any better. We were laughing about that. You know, it's a famous bumper sticker for a reason, right? Shit does happen. And you know what? It's happening daily. And, you know, that time, those different times in my life, when I think about it, you know, I just wanted a breath. I just needed a breath, but life doesn't stop. Life doesn't wait. And I think that's where we could really put ourselves into a lot of bad spaces, is because you think that everybody should cut you some slack, that the world should stop and pay attention to you. And unfortunately, the world just keeps moving. It's a big place with lots going on. And, you know, the quicker that you can find a way to heal, the quicker that you can find your way out of it, you know, through these processes that we've talked about, the better you're going to be and the better everybody around you is going to be. And, you know, the community is just so important. And we talked about it when we were in Humboldt, is, you know, that this is going to be painful for a while, but together, if you're all taking care of yourselves, you're going to be able to accelerate the pain that we in Swift Current didn't know and suffered for a long time. And it wasn't until, you know, a 30-year reunion with Hockey Day in Canada and all these celebrations that I really felt like the cloud had lifted off of the town of Swift Current. You know, every time I went back there, there was this big, heavy cloud with all of the trauma that we had suffered as a community. And it took that long for it to be lifted. And we don't want that same thing for you people in the house. You're good people, and we understand that there's suffering going on out there. And we're here to tell you that if you can, well, like Clint said, get your shit together and get on with it, odds are life's going to go better a lot quicker. We've got a message here from Chief Warden that we absolutely want to play, because he's got so much experience in being able to overcome trauma. Go ahead and listen to this, and we'll be back.
We know now, and I think there's the research has been I think done very well in the last 10 years to know that those events, or those traumatic events, whether they be in early years or even in later years, can impact the way people behave. And of course, now you're judging their behaviors and not understanding how they've gotten there. So a lot of times we become frustrated with people because they're acting a certain way. And it's almost, when you talk about addictions as well, you're like, why can't that person stop drinking? Or why can't that person start doing drugs? Well, it's not that simple. It's not as simple as a choice. There are things usually in the background that are driving those behaviors and driving them to try to seek some sort of relief from the trauma. So again, when you talk about the stigma of people, I know, like, say, working with first responders who go and see, they say police officers see up to 10 to 400 times more traumatic events than your normal individual. So you can only imagine the type of things that police officers see and do and are involved with. So those are not good things. Like, traumatic events are not good things for the brain. So when you have a stigma that really stops people from addressing those, seeking help, seeking support, and it just keeps people, they just keep them inside and try to deal with themselves. That stigma is really quite damaging to an organization, to the people. So the same thing with the people out in the public, right? If we are very judgmental on the people with mental health issues in the community, and all we're looking at is the behavior, it should be punished. There should be some sort of consequence of punishment. If that's our only thought, then we don't think about the root cause and actually trying to cure those issues, right? So the root of those behaviors, then we're just going to have recidivism, all about crime and all about bad behavior in our society. So it really does. It's complex. There's no question about it. It's not simple to solve, and it does take us to have give considerate thought to people and what's brought them to those to that location in their life, right? Like when they're having those struggles.
So many things that are happening out there, and we're in the 21st century, and I think that's what a lot of people think. We've got all these different generations, and you've got the older people and the younger people, and everybody's judging everybody for what we're going through and how we're dealing with it. And I think if we can all take that step back, take a breath, and say, okay, what's happened to you, and let's have a conversation about that. We're getting ready to slow things down a little bit here. The chat is open. You can also ask any questions. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end. Kate, why don't you go ahead and start talking about some of the top 3 takeaways there in what people should be remembering from our conversation.
Yeah, I think, you can see on the screen here is just, and like Lindsay alluded to, finding somebody to talk with, finding your support system. Who are they? How do you access them? Can you call them? Can you get together with social distancing protocols, all of that kind of stuff? And also on the flip side, recognizing, are you in the place to be that person for somebody else? Or are you too shifted far off and you're not able to be a support? And that's okay too, right? It's just just knowing where we're at and what we can offer, but just finding someone and not feeling ashamed or guilty about needing that. I would challenge you to find somebody that hasn't experienced a traumatic event, that doesn't have an emotional reaction to something in their lives that has changed them for the better or worse. You're not alone in this. And there's no need to feel guilty, because this is just an experience that you've had and you're going to move forward. And then if you feel like you need more support than that, always reaching out for that professional support, figuring out who you can connect with and relate to, so that you can start the journey to understanding yourself a little bit more and making some progress in terms of your emotional response and that stress system.
And Sean, just keep going. There's lots of good stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I look at that really, really, really good list, I'm reminded of this concept of dopamine release in the brain. And I think it's really important to spend a minute going, dopamine is this kind of pleasure seeking that our brain really, really enjoys. And it's very, very inevitable, and we want it. And there's some real negative ways that dopamine can be released in our brain, like high risk sex, self-harm, drugs, alcohol. Despite the textbooks that I've read in my life and the training, I have participated in all of those and can confirm that those in a temporary fix feel really, really good. The good news is there are still these healthy things, like being, acts of service, doing kind things for other people, engaging in physical movement, regulation, dancing, music, positive relational connections, physical fitness, sports, recreation. Those also release dopamine in our brain. And so I think that idea is that our brain really wants this pleasure seeking. And if we don't tend to push ourselves into those more positive activities, I can certainly speak from personal experience that we're much more likely to engage in those kind of higher risk behaviors for that temporary, pleasure release in our brain.
Yeah. And the last one, and I think this is what I've learned on my journey, is put a plan in place, right? Like just start today. I'm gonna talk to so-and-so because I'm finally going to open up, or you know what, I'm going to research a therapist. We've got great people here that tomorrow night are going to join us for our support group chat, along with all the rest of the I Got Mine team. Come in, right? If you find that tonight you've been made aware of some things and maybe you want to learn some more, come tomorrow. And every step forward is a step closer you get to feeling the way that you want to feel. Because if you're not moving in that direction, it absolutely, is going to take you in the wrong way. And when we talk about, that action is always necessary to take that step forward. And here at I Got Mine, that's been my intention with this since I started in 2008. I wanted to educate people on what helped me heal. And so if you're looking for resources, check out our website. We've got lots of different talks where you'll see Sean on the screen, or Kate and I on the screen, talking about all these different things that could be troubling you, right? Ignorance is not bliss. You want to make sure that you're educating yourself so that you're not struggling. And there's a couple of new initiatives that we just want to make everybody aware of. So we're going to be starting a new podcast, and we're calling it Uncommon Sense. And check out the website for more details. If you get a chance, check it out. We've also taken one of our most successful success strategies programs that we used for athletes and tweaked it and converted a bit. And now we have a men's mental health program. So we're very much dedicated to finding and providing as many solutions as we possibly can for you out there, the people that may be a little bit confused or maybe struggling just a little bit. Sean, as we wrap up, is there any final thoughts that you have?
Just that I appreciate the courage of this community. I don't know, there's just a deep connection I feel to the hat. I love being down there. I look forward, hopefully this summer, to maybe talk with Jennifer and Reagan, having a cup of coffee. I'd love to meet some people in person if there's a way to make that happen. One thing I was thinking about is that I've done, we do these kind of activities, right, and work related things, and it's what's your spirit animal, and I can remember actually putting some effort into that and thinking about my spirit animal being the buffalo, and it's not just because I'm big and hairy, although that's true, but I really like the concept that the buffalo actually, when a storm comes up, the buffalo puts its head into the storm and it walks forward. And I really believe that to be true with myself. And I believe that to be true with the community of the Hat right now, is that we've got to just find a way to put our face in the storm and just keep walking forward. And I think if we do that and we remember the buffalo, you know, I just hope that can be helpful for others. It's certainly been helpful for me as I've managed some adversity in my own life.
Yeah. Kate, any final words?
Oof, it's a tough act to follow. But I think, you know, like Sean said, I commend you for being here. This is the first step. We have all had different experiences in our lives, and I hope that this information and this knowledge is as powerful for you as it has been for me and the people that I work with. And I'm excited to move forward with this and yeah, keep on keeping on.
Great job, guys. We got one more video. There's a reason we're here, and it was because we lost someone, and I didn't know him, but I've come to know him. And I thought it was important as a reminder as we finish up here, when we don't deal with stuff, it takes to the deep, dark places. And I've been there several times in my life, and it's not fun. Well, I'm surprised I'm still here, to be honest. This video is just Lindsay sharing a little bit about her brother and how special he was. Let's not forget, if we don't do this work, these are potential endings. These aren't endings that are good for anybody. So go ahead and watch us. We'll be right back.
I mean, I've had pretty intense grief and I still miss that dog. And so Leaf said, you know, you should talk about Missy, because if anyone ever saw Brandon with Missy, it sort of explained Brandon, like, because he loved that. He had a girlfriend once, and she didn't like Missy because she shed. And so Brandon like, well, she doesn't like Missy, and she moved in, and can like Missy live with you until we sort this out? And I'm like, yeah. And then after about a couple weeks, he's like, she's not letting up on this. Like, I'm like, well, you have a big decision to make, but I don't really give you my opinion on shit. But and then the girlfriend said, well, it's me or the dog. And he was like, bye.
That's a great story, Lindsay, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Again, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. There's a link on the website where you registered here for the event tomorrow. If you need any help tonight, if you've been triggered by anything, those phone numbers that are on the screen are so important to understand. Listen, you're not alone. And I hope tonight that we've painted that picture for you that you're not. We're all here for you. And we really look forward to the group session tomorrow night, where we'll have more clinical people. Kate will be there, Sean will be there, Ken will be there, along with the rest of the I Got Mine team. And we're just gonna have a little bit more education on the different forms of trauma, some more of the different effects. And we're gonna have breakout rooms where we can chat and share and really get the conversation going. Because one of the things that I've learned in doing this work is it's not necessarily that people don't want to talk about it, it's that they don't know how to talk about it. And so that's why our sessions are, so powerful, is because we teach people how to have that conversation. So we'll hang around for a little bit. Thank you so much for watching tonight. If there's any questions or things in the chat, we'll be hanging out here for a few minutes. But if you've had enough and you're ready to go eat, thank you so much. And hopefully you'll join us next Monday, where we're going to be talking about grief and loss with my special friend, Darren Kruger and Willie Desjardins. So thanks for listening and tuning in. Sadie, do we have any things in the chat that, any questions for us here? Oh, God. Angela, very good. Lots of great comments in the chat there. Excellent. had no access, some socioeconomical barriers. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate your input on those videos. The uniform did look good. We were teasing him about how he looked so official with all that, right? That's good. It's you know, these kind of talks are just so much fun to have, Sean. Like they're so powerful, right? We've been doing this, traveling around to the communities. It's awesome to be able to share this information.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're often our hardest critics, you know, of does this matter and do people care? But it is very, very, very rewarding when you feel like in some small way, if you've made a connection with somebody, or if you've maybe made a point, or it's made them think about something, it's that act of service, right? Is a very powerful thing, and this feels like a privilege, really, you know, and you know, for this family foundation to support us being here is it just really feels something very special to be a part of. I hope it's had a positive impact on some folks out there tonight, for sure.
Just a shout out to Reagan and Jen and Lindsay and Greg and Chief, you know, everybody that's helped put this together. Kate, I'm curious. So this is your second big event with us here, and so what do you think? How did it go tonight for you?
Better every time, I think. We'll see what the feedback is. But, you know, despite how hard it is for me to sit here in front of a camera and talk to people, I love educating, I love training, but I love people. I don't love cameras. So everything in me wants to be there to meet you and to talk to you and to connect with you. But this will have to do. And I'm here because I believe the importance of this information. I believe that this is life-changing information, and it can help you with control and the power and all of the things that I believe that will be helpful for you right now. And so that's why I'm here. I'm learning, learning every time I do these things, and I'm grateful to be here. It's fantastic.
So you got off the hook tonight too, a little bit.
Yeah.
You were all, oh, what's he going to ask me? Because I always love to just kind of, Sean, you know, I had asked you both to kind of come with the story of something that you have experienced and, you know, in your life, because again, we want to be as, you know, relatable as we possibly can as people that are trying to support. Do you mind sharing a little bit about a story of a time that it's a great story?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it centers around water in three kind of distinct incidences that do make me very grateful for the fact that I am here today. They were all accidental, but my father and I at one point by the dam near the place where I grew up, heard a father and his son drowning, calling for help. We're able to go. It was a pretty amazing moment with my dad. Watched him kind of bust a limb. You know, he's an old heavy duty mechanic and kind of just hardworking guy. Busted a limb off a tree and kind of got in there and you know, was able to get sort of the notch of a tree and we got some people out of the water. And I just remember I remember the sights, the sounds, the screams, the yells. And then sadly myself participated in some, you know, kind of drinking and drug induced events related to water. You know, one time got pretty intoxicated. It was St. Lawrence River, Thousand Islands near Kingston, Ontario, where I grew up. I was down getting more booze out of the boat. It was sort of March or April, right around this time, pretty cold still. You know, fell in the water, hit my head on the engine. Was pretty much done for. There was my buddy still, you know, there was cheesies floating around. So they were sort of, you know, jabbing me for chasing cheesies. Luckily, some guy happened to see me and, you know, it was really, really a rare, unique experience. And kind of got me out of the water. And then about 5 years ago again, out at Lake Koocanusa and, you know, decided to go out in the water again, swimming when getting a ball from my dog that blew away really, really far away, which, stupidity, bonehead thing. You'd think maybe if my dog realizes the ball is at risk that I wouldn't go out, but certainly went out, caught some water in the face, started, luckily, again, a couple of friends that were able to. So, I've had a few of just these experiences, and then I will get these kind of panicked, intrusive thoughts when I'm around water. And it really, lots of the things Clint talks about, it brings up physical reactions in me. It brings up really kind of catastrophizing thinking or intrusive thoughts. And I often need to kind of ground myself, but I've also needed to make some very distinctive choices around the way I behave around water, because I've just been really, really reckless. And I can remember seeing my little kids and my wife at the boat and really thinking that I wasn't going to see them again. And so I just feel very privileged to have learned, I think, hopefully now, from some really dumb decisions that included, drugs and alcohol in a couple of instances, that I just feel really lucky and blessed that I'm not, a story that my friends are talking about, and that I actually can maybe try to do something more positive and educational with some of my boneheaded past experiences for sure.
Well, we've all had bonehead moments, Sean, so can totally relate there. Again, thanks so much. If you haven't registered, please do so. I know Ray put the link in so that you could get to the website for tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It's going to be a great conversation. And next Monday with the grief and loss chat with Krugs and Willie is going to be another good one with Kate and Sean again. These are faces that you're going to get to see. So we're going to sign off. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. Keep trucking, right? You can overcome anything. And well, take care of yourself.